komunidad, para sa lahat. Noon hanggang ngayon, ito ang aming tugon. Sa panahon ngayon, ano na nga ba ang pangako?
Ito ang walang kinikilalang layo o hadlang para sa mga mahal ko sa buhay.
Ito ang paggarantisa na tuloy ang aral, trabaho at negosyo para sa lahat.
Ito ang pagkalinga sa kabataan upang mapagpatuloy nila ang pag-abot sa mga pangarap. Magbago man ang panahon, hahanap tayo ng pagkakataon.
Pagbuhos ito ng alaga at atensyon sa mga lugar na kailangan ng tulong at suporta.
Ito yung patuloy na paghanap ng paraan at paggawa ng diskarte para sa kabubuti ng lahat.
Pagiging pamilya siya sa mga taong pinakamalapit at malapit sa iyo.
Pagiging nanay ko ito sa mga tinuturing ko na ding mga anak.
Sa bawat luto at hain ko, nasasabi ko nandito ako para sa kanila.
Bilang panganay, likas na sa akin ang pagiging maalaga, kaya manong na rin ang tawag nila sa akin dito.
Part ito ng pagiging world class, ngayong Global Filipino Talent, hindi lang para sa iba, pero para sa atin din.
Ito ang paghatid ng ginhawa at aruga sa mga taong may mahal din sa buhay tulad ko.
Abilidad itong makita ang sarili sa gitna ng lahat at masabing nasa tamang lugar ako at ginagawa ko ang lahat.
Ito ang diwa ng Ayala. Ang pangako walang kinikilalang layo o hadlang. Ang pagmamalasakit sa pamilya, sa komunidad, at sa bayan. Pagtanaw at paglikha ng oportunidad para sa lahat. Noon hanggang ngayon, ito ang aming tugon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I am Dr. Jamie Michelle Iran Galang. We always want to see your children grow up healthy and strong. That's why I'm very happy to welcome you once again to the Qualimed Health Talks at your fingertips. Here, we have our dear specialists from Qualimed Santa Rosa who are very kind enough to give us helpful informations and tips to keep our children healthy and strong. I'm sure everyone is eager to listen to our webinar for today, but of course, we have to have some reminders to our webinar. To avoid distractions during the lecture, kindly follow these instructions. Keep your mic on mute. Turn off your video camera. If you have questions, send to us by typing in the chat box. We will answer your questions during the Q&A session. If you're watching via Facebook Live, kindly send your questions through the comment section of the video stream. Thank you, and let's enjoy the knowledge sharing today. Let's now start everything with a prayer.
Let's place ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear God, we offer everything to you during this webinar. May we ask for your blessing and divine providence that the activities set for this undertaking be successful and effective. May we be living witnesses of your genuine love through the implementation of the knowledge acquired through this activity. Grant us your divine wisdom as we go about our daily task after this webinar. This we ask in Jesus' name, amen.
It's always a pleasure to introduce the head of the Pediatric Department of Qualimed Santa Rosa, our very reliable and supportive chairman, very busy but always finds time for us, for her advocacies, and for all her passions and love. Let's all welcome our dear Dr. Riz Gonzalez as she inspires us with her opening message.
Gandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. I hope everyone is safe. And meron kami nakikita ko no may mga loyalists na tayong parents and subscriber. This is actually our fourth webinar since we started this May. So we started with immunizations for us to remind you that in spite of the pandemic, no, yung mga anak natin dapat i-catch up natin ang mga bakuna. True enough, April, we have reminders for flu vaccination and understanding flu versus against COVID. Ngayon, marami na namang kubo o sipon. So, kung meron ng flu vaccine yung anak nyo, medyo mas hindi na kayo kakabahan. Pati kayo, no, mga nanay, tatay, lolo, lola, tita, tito. Now, tapos na yung klase, yung third webinar namin was intended for you and we challenge you, bring back the books to your home. So, kasi lahat online, ano, but mind you, what are your learnings during the last webinar? Books build better brains. It also gives books build better connection with parents. Now, bakasyon na naman, quarantine pa rin ng mga bata, anong mga pinapakain nyo sa mga bata? Palagay ko marami sila nakikita online. So, are we feeding them right? So that's why this June, we want this parents webinar, nutrition tips for your kids. Kalimitan kasi, ito yung aming scenario sa clinic, no? Dok, bigyan mo ng vitamins yung anak namin para mas maganda yung katawan. as if vitamins lamang ang nagpapaganda ka ng katawan. This webinar will give you insights as to beyond vitamins, there are more things that we should know how to feed our kids. So thank you again for all our loyalties. Thank you, Natra Farm, for supporting our webinar. Thank you, Qualinet and AC Health for sustaining and helping us continue reaching out to our parents amidst this pandemic. So magandang gabi po ulit.
All right. So I am always happy. Thank you, Dr. Riz. I am always happy and honored to introduce our speaker for today. Malugod po akong nagpapasalamat na pinaunlakan niya tayo na bigyan ng kanyang expertise, bahagian ng kanyang expertise. She is a diplomate of Philippine Pediatric Society, also a diplomate of the Philippine Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition. She is a fellow of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition at the University of Santo Tomas Hospital. Also as a chief fellow and chief president of the Department of Pediatrics at University of Santo Tomas Hospital. She finished her Doctor of Medicine at the University of Santo Tomas Faculty of Medicine and Surgery. She is now the chair of the Department of Pediatrics at Calamba Doctors Hospital, member of Breastfeeding and Human Milk Bank Committee, Nutrition Management Service at the Medical City South Luzon. She is also the Public Relations Officer at the University of Santo Tomas Pediatric Fellows and Residents Alumni Association. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Angelica May A. Hilario.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your kind introduction, Dr. Thank you all for being here. So tonight, I'll be talking about nutrition tips for your kids because I know that a lot of you parents struggle to make your children eat right, no? So hopefully by the end of the night, you'll be able to learn something to make your child eat healthy. So as pediatricians, you always stress to the parents the importance of nutrition. So why is nutrition important? So adequate nutrition during infancy and childhood is essential to ensure the growth, health, and development of your child to their full potential. So it protects them against malnutrition, it reduces the risk of illness, and it promotes a system that protects against infection. So a safe and healthy diet contributes to an optimal state of health for your child, and it is fundamental to your child's survival. So I want to stress that food learning starts very early. So the first 2 years of life is a critical window of opportunity for ensuring your child's appropriate growth and development through optimal feeding. So the first 2 years of life, it's important also for the development of healthy eating habits. So early experiences can actually shape and modify the early flavor and food preferences of your child, thereby increasing their acceptance to the food available in the environment. So when you say optimal feeding in the first 2 years of life, what does it mean? No? So of course, it's the early initiation of breastfeeding, and we always emphasize exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life. And of course, after that, there's the introduction of the nutritionally adequate and safe solid food at 6 months, together with continued breastfeeding for up to 2 years of age or beyond. So when you say exclusive breastfeeding, an infant receives only breast milk from his or her mother, or even express breast milk. There are no other liquids or solids that you give to your child, not even water, with the exception of oral hydration or drops or syrups if vitamins and minerals are needed at this point, and other medications. So your exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life, it meets all the nutrients that are required for your child, no? Because sometimes they ask me, Doctora, bakit hindi pwedeng bigyan ng tubig in the first 6 months of life? Because really, breast milk itself is already around 88% water. That's why hindi naman nila kailangan ng water in the first 6 months of life for as long as you're adequately breastfeeding your child. And another advantage of breastfeeding is, did you know that breastfeeding is associated with willingness to try new taste, no? Because the exposure to flavors in breast milk, because usually what the mother eats, it's actually the flavors are transmitted to the breast milk. So parang yung child, they are familiar with the flavor of the diet of the mother. So during early milk feeding and weaning, when you start your solid food, it actually facilitates the acceptance of the child to a lot of other food. So you call that the flavor bridge, no? So that's one importance of breastfeeding. So it's not just nutrition, but it actually helps the child in the future to accept new taste. So when you talk about complementary feeding, so it's when breast milk is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional requirements. Diba? In the first 6 months of life, breast milk is enough. But then as the child grows older, they need more nutrients. That's why you start your solid food or your complementary feeding. And what I want you to remember, no, as parents, is that the target age for full establishment of complementary feeding is at 2 years old. That's why it's very important that you learn about how to start your complementary feeding for your child. So usually when you start your complementary feeding, you transition, right, from a milk-based diet to a mixed diet. So usually it's breast milk, and so for some children, they drink formula, and also a variety of complementary feeding. So it's very important, the period of complementary feeding, because the infants, they experience new taste, no? Because you start to introduce different kinds of food, and then also textures and smell, and it can actually help stimulate the appetite of your child. So it's not just an important time to satisfy the nutrition of your child, but also it's a time to form healthy food preferences and feeding practice. Remember, I said earlier that food learning starts very early, no? Because this is important for you to remember, because 'di ba ang dami sa mga anak natin na they say na, doktora, ang pili niyang kumain. So this one, it can actually help prevent your child to become picky eaters for as long as you start early and trying to make them eat right. So another is that if you try to give your child good nutrition, it will actually stimulate the infant's ongoing healthy development. So I would like you to remember this acronym, no? So when you start your complementary feeding, yung solid foods for your child, just remember the acronym PAST. So what does it mean? So P means that your child should be properly fed. So the food that you are giving your child should have the correct consistency. So later sasabihin ko kung ano yung tamang consistency, and also the frequency. And another important aspect is that you also respond to your baby's hunger and satiety signal. So meaning, titignan mo kung gutom yung anak mo o kaya kung baka busog na siya. And you learn about it, no, after caring for your child for a few months. And then adequacy, it just means that you are giving the right amount of food to your child so that your child will grow. And of course, the food that you're giving needs to be safe. So how can you ensure safety? So of course, especially at this time of pandemic, you need to practice proper hand washing and proper food storage. And it should be timely. So you start at 6 months. So that's the recommendation, because remember, in the first 6 months of life, ang gusto natin is exclusive breastfeeding. But then it's very important that at 6 months, you start your complementary food. So in terms of consistency, usually kasi ito in the clinic, no, we get asked, doktora, paano ba namin sisimulan pakainin yung anak namin? So usually at 6 months, you should introduce a pureed, and then if the child is able to eat it, you can actually introduce mashed food after some time. And then at 8 months, you can give mashed or lumpy food. And then some patients at 8 months, they may start finger food, but usually I recommend that you start finger food at around 10 months. And by 1 year old, your child should be eating what you are eating on the table. So table food na dapat. So you gradually increase the food consistency and also the variety as your child gets older. So it would depend kung what your child requires in terms of feeding and also the ability of your child to eat. So you also increase the number of times that the child is fed, no, as your baby gets older. So for 6 to 8 months, you can start at 2 to 3 times a day. And then at 9 to 11 months, you can start your complementary feeding at 3 to 4 times a day. And then by around 1 to 2 years old, you can start giving meals around 3 to 4 times a day with a few snacks. But this is not really a hard and fast rule na dapat 2 to 3 times mo lang siyang papakainin. Remember, I said earlier that you also need to recognize the hunger cues of your child. So pag gutom na siya, hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin na, nako, naka 2 times na siya. So dahil naka 2 times na siyang kumain today, hindi ko na siya pwedeng bigyan ng pagkain. So you just need to be aware about the needs of your child. Kung gutom pa siya, you may give, no? So important aspects of your successful complementary feeding could also be key for the child not to develop picky eating. So it's the when, the what, and the how. So when you say when, no, so that's the timing. So it's the timing of the initiation of your complementary feeding. So you start at 6 months, right? So what it means that it's the balance of food that you give and the nutrients that you give your child. And they said that if you introduce the different types of consistency of food, kunyari, di ba, I said that you can give lumpy food at around 8 to 9 months. Studies show that if you are late in the timing of introduction of the different consistencies of food, mas nagiging problema yung pagkain in the future, no? So, mas magkakaroon sila ng mga feeding difficulties, and then nakita nila that as the child grows older, mas mababa yung intake nila of vegetables if you don't start right and if you don't properly feed your child, especially when you start your complementary feeding. In terms of how, no, so that aspect, it's more on about the interaction of you, mothers, and your child, no, as to the feeding of your children. So this is very important because yung feeding process, it's actually an interaction. So between the child and the parent or whoever cares for the child. So the actions of the parents or the caregiver, it actually affects the eating behavior of the child. So mainly the feeding process, it's dependent on the mother or the caregiver. So I would like to discuss about the feeding style. So every child and parent, they are influenced by the feeding experience, no? So each parent, they have a different feeding style. So pwedeng yung iba demanding, yung iba responsive. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure that some of you, if you reflect while I'm talking, maiisip ninyo na, nako, medyo ganun ako. Because usually when parents are anxious kasi hindi sila kumakain, yung anak nila, feeling nila, kulang yung kinakain, what they tend to be is they tend to be controlling. 'Di ba? Ang mangyayari, pipilitin mo ngayon yung anak mong kumain. So magagalit ka na. Gagawin mo, magagalit ka na, kailangan kung ano yung pagkain, you force your child to eat what's on the table. May iba namang parents, what they do is that if the child doesn't want to eat what they prepared, para lang kumain yung bata, ibibigay mo na lang kung ano yung gusto niya, no? So meron namang iba because they are just too tired to bother themselves about properly feeding their child, hindi na lang nila pinapansin kung gutom yung anak nila or not. So usually if they are demanding or controlling, yung pag kumakain, nagkagalit or kaya naman indulgent, initially it works, 'di ba? So you can actually feed your child kapag medyo pinapagalitan mo na siya or you give what your child likes. But then, in the long run, hindi siya magiging productive. They found out that if you try that style of feeding to your child, ang nangyayari is that when they grow older, they are more selective. Mas mapili sila sa pagkain, mas nagiging picky eater sila, and then mas konti yung pagkain na kinakain nila in the long run. So what's the most ideal style? So it's more on the responsive type of feeding. So that's one very important aspect. You should practice responsive feeding. So what does it mean, no? So the responsive feeders, you guide your child's eating instead of controlling it. So you set limits, and then you model appropriate eating. You talk positively about food. It's not about like meal times, nag-aaway lang kayo nag-aaway, and you respond to your child's feeding signals. So when you're a responsive feeder, you arrange the schedule of your child to induce appetite. So what do I mean by that? So you are aware whether your child is hungry or not, no? And then you reward your child if you set goals and then they are able to achieve it. So it's like a positive reinforcement, no? And then you don't resort to unpleasant coercive techniques. So this feeding style, the responsive feeding style, it's reported to result in the child eating more fruits, vegetables, and less junk food. And most importantly, for responsive feeders, there's what we call the concept of division of responsibility. So I will teach you about the division of responsibility. So what they're saying is that for your child to have good eating habits, it's a responsibility of both the parent and the child. So you have different responsibilities. So it would depend on the stage of the child's development or kung ilang taon na yung bata. So for example, infants, diba? So they cannot talk. So usually we recommend that they should be fed on demand. So when they're hungry, that's the time that you feed the child. So you need to be aware kung mukhang gutom ba yung anak mo or not. So you let them determine the timing, so when they're hungry, and also the tempo of the feeding. So as the child develops, what happens is that usually they are more regular in their eating patterns, 'di ba? In the first few months of life, hindi kayo nakakatulog because you don't know when your child is hungry, tas tuloy-tuloy lang that you need to feed and feed. But as the child grows older, 'di ba, they have more regular eating patterns, meaning they develop the skills for eating, and 'di ba, at 1 year old, they already sit at the table and they eat with you. Hindi na yung kahit madaling araw kumakain sila. And later, usually when they're already in school, and especially if they're already teenagers, usually they are more responsible for their own feeding. So an example of the division of responsibility for younger children. So when you feed your toddlers, the parent or you, the mother, the caregiver, you decide what, when, and where the child eats. But what's the responsibility of your child? So the child decides how much he eats and whether the child will eat the food that you offer. So this concept is a little bit difficult for some parents, no? Kasi ang iniisip ninyo, sometimes, di ba, like what you put on the child's plate, kailangan maubos niya yon. But really, your responsibility is just to prepare the food and then also decide what time your child will eat. But if busog na kasi siya or your child doesn't have that big an appetite, hindi naman siya gutom, it's okay if they don't eat too much, no? That's one thing that I think that parents or mothers should also keep in mind, that hindi naman dapat na porket yun yung nilagay ninyo, yun yung dapat mauubos niya. Because in terms of feeding, it's actually your child who will decide how much they will eat. Because if they are hungry, eventually they will eat again, no? So the job of the child is they will eat the amount that they need. They will learn eventually to eat the food that you eat, and they will learn to behave well at mealtime. So usually children naman, they have a natural ability with eating. So if you let them eat well, if you try to practice the division of responsibility, they learn how to eat well, or they learn how to eat better, and they grow with eating. No, they have healthier eating habits. So another tip in terms of trying to teach your child to eat healthy is you sit together at the table during mealtime. So teaching children healthy eating habits requires setting a good example. So you should share a meal together as a family as often as possible, especially now during the pandemic, 'di ba? Everybody is at home. So it's actually a good time to bond with your family and you eat together during meal times. Because why is this important in terms of eating? Because usually meal times, sharing a meal as a family, is a good time to model healthy eating. So in children, modeling eating by the parents is the most important factor. 'Di ba? Sinasabi nila na kung ano yung ginagawa ng matanda, yun yung ginagaya ng bata. So that's really actually the principle of modeling in terms of trying to promote healthy eating in your children. And nade-develop din nila yung social skills nila when you eat together or when they eat with other people. And the parents can act as role models to their child by eating healthy food with them. One problem that I encounter in the clinic is sasabihin nila, Doktora, paano yun? Yung daddy niya, hindi kumakain ng gulay. So, hindi kami nagpa-prepare ng gulay. So, it's very difficult for you to model and show your child that this is the way to eat healthy if you yourself hindi kayo kumakain ng healthy food, no? So usually your habits is the one that your child will also develop. So if you want your child to eat healthy, you want to for them to develop good eating habits, then the first thing that you should do is to model that good eating or good eating behavior and healthy eating. So the beauty of the strategy of trying to model healthy eating is it can help your kids to overcome picky eating. Kasi 'di ba usually yung mga bata, gagayahin nila yung parents nila kahit hindi pa nila natatry, ginagaya nila, titikman nila. Even if at first they don't like it, but usually if they see you and they get used to seeing you eating those type of food, they will know that healthy foods are safe, it's normal, and delicious. Masarap din naman kahit siya vegetables, no? And then, also, if the time comes that your child is already ready to try vegetables or other food, then it's available because that's the habit of the family already to serve nutritious and healthy food. So another tip is to make it fun and engaging for your child and to get your child involved in terms of food preparation. So making food fun is a good strategy to teach children, especially toddlers, no, to accept new food, yung mga maliliit na bata, because they are more open to trying food which are fun. Diba? There was a time, I think, I'm not so sure if until now, uso pa rin siya yung mga mothers na gumagawa ng mga bento box, diba? So it's a way of enticing their child to try new food and also to try healthier food, because they make the food look irresistible, and then it's fun, it's colorful, tapos yung mga shapes that they do, the kids can recognize it. So they can try it. They also like finger food, so you can prepare finger foods for your child, and then you can put dips, because usually, diba, they like to put things in their mouth. So put that to good use. So you try to give them finger foods, but healthy food, no? So, but remember that you should also try to be careful in preparing these types of foods so that there's no risk of choking for your child. Baka pag masyadong malalaki yung mga finger food, of course, there's the risk of choking. So involve your child in meal planning and food preparation. So you can ask them to pick ano yung fruit, ano yung vegetable na gusto nilang kainin, or you can bring them to the grocery store and then you can let them pick and choose, no? Because usually if they're exposed to you shopping for healthy food, hindi yung mga mga junk food, yung mga parang mga biscuits, no, yun yung makakasanayan nila, yun yung makikita nila na behavior in terms of trying to prepare your meals. So you can also try to read cookbooks together, and then you can ask them to pick ano ba yung gusto nilang lutuin for tonight, and then you can ask them to help you prepare all that, because usually they said that if you involve your child in meal planning and food preparation, there's actually lower picky eating behavior when they grow older. So you can also assign cooking tasks, no? So how can you get them involved? So make them part of the meal preparation by, for example, asking them to stir your ingredients, or kunyari, if you're baking, you ask them to sift the flour or even count the ingredients depending on how old your child is. For older children, you can ask them to chop the ingredients and even try cooking the meals themselves. So it makes them think that food preparation is fun, and mas na-accept nila, no, na parang I wanna try this because I was involved in making the food and cooking the food or preparing the food. Another nice strategy for parents is that you can use healthy goal trackers, like a food group tracker. So this one, you can actually find it in the internet. You can just search for food trackers and find one that's more applicable for you. So you can ask the child to mark the boxes and track how many servings they were able to eat in a day. So for example, your goal is to have 5 servings of vegetables and fruit per day. So every time that your child eats a fruit or the vegetable, you ask them to shade the box or tick the box, and then you're also able to track if the child is able to eat a diverse diet. And also, you can make this a way of motivating your child. So for example, if you reach 5 stars for this week, meaning your child was able to eat a lot of the different types of food for the week, you can give your child a reward. No? So it's a way of reinforcing trying to eat healthy for your child. So next tip is you have to set feeding guidelines. So I think that in terms of trying to teach your child to eat healthy, this is actually one of the most important aspects that all parents should learn. So it's actually essential to prevent feeding problems and yung mga feeding difficulties, because if you start early and then you follow these feeding guidelines, you can actually prevent your child from being picky eaters in the future. Kasi for me, it's more on preventing your child to become picky eaters. Kaya nga, we want to teach you on how you should try to introduce the food to your child and how you should start feeding them so that they will not develop picky eating in the future. So your feeding guidelines, it will help you become more responsive feeders, which I already discussed earlier, no? And it will prevent you from having counterproductive practices, like especially yung lagi ko nakikita is yung nagagalit during meal times. So the next few slides will show you the feeding guidelines, and it applies to all children, no? So the first one is you feed to encourage appetite. So you need to teach your child to regulate eating according to hunger and fullness. So dapat yung cues, remember sinabi ko kanina, you need to learn whether your child is hungry or your child is full already. So to make your child feel hungry, you have to feed your child at regular times, and you space the meals and snacks around 3 to 4 hours apart. So hindi yung every hour you give something to your child. You call that grazing, yung parang kuha lang sila ng kuha on the table ng food, and then every hour meron silang kinakain ng kinakain. That's not good practice, because you don't regulate the hunger and satiety of the child. Kasi lagi lang siyang busog, kasi kain lang siya ng kain, no? So you do not allow them to have any snacks, even juice, and especially milk. Diba? We see a lot of children na gatas lang siya ng gatas. So if you schedule your meal times, usually in between, you should not give your children milk, because if your child gets thirsty, you only offer water. And if the child is allowed to drink milk kasi or juice or snack, hindi na siya magugutom during mealtime. Kaya ang nagiging reklamo, Doktora, bakit pagdating ng lunchtime, wala na siyang kinakain, ang konti-konti niyang kinakain, kumakain naman siya ng snacks? Because that's the reason why, no? They already had a lot before the meal. So pagdating ng meal time, which is more important, busog na sila kasi ang dami na nilang kinain prior to that. So if you keep the child on a meal schedule, it facilitates the awareness of hunger and it teaches them to eat until they are full. So hanggang sa busog sila, no? And another important aspect is that you should limit the meal duration to 20 to 30 minutes. So what do we mean by this, no? So for example, for lunchtime, you eat at 12. Then the meal should be done at around 12:20 to 12:30. So why is this important? So again, as I said, you try to regulate your child's hunger and fullness. I had a patient before who said a meal time would last 5 hours. And I said, bakit 5 hours? Ang konti, ang liit-liit lang ng anak niya, pero 5 oras. And sabi niya, Doktora, parang ang tagal niya lang pakainin, hindi niya kinakain, no? So, may mga ginagawa yung bata, takbo ng takbo, the child seems very distracted, no? So, the problem with that is, of course, hindi nila nararamdaman that they're hungry and they're full. If you let your child eat for more than an hour or some, yun nga, 5 hours, kakain siya. Don't worry if for example in the 20 to 30 minutes that your child ate very little, eventually they will learn to make up for the food that they didn't eat in the next meal time. So matututunan nila yon. That's the reason why you really have to set a time for or a schedule for your child's eating or snacking. So you have to maintain a pleasant and neutral attitude throughout the meal. So this is what I was stressing about earlier, that yung meal time sometimes nagiging battlefield siya. Just this morning, I had a patient, yung mommy, sabi niya, Doktora, away kami. So it's always like that, no? Especially if you're trying to feed a younger child or a toddler, lagi daw siyang away. So you just maintain a neutral attitude. So you praise the child for the skills. For example, your child is able to use a fork or a spoon, but you do not comment about your child's intake. Huwag kang magagalit kung konti lang yung kinain niya. Huwag kang magagalit na parang wala siyang kinain. So just be neutral. And then don't criticize them na parang ang konti ng kinain. Because again, the eating or your child's eating behavior should be regulated by their needs, their physiological needs. Kasi baka hindi naman siya ganun kagutom, no? So another important feeding guideline is that you should avoid distractions during mealtime. So di ba with the advent of all the gadgets now, lahat ng bata habang kumakain, majority, they have the phone in front of them, they have the TV on, and sasabihin ng parents, kasi Doktora, mas kumakain siya kapag nakahawak siya ng iPad or nakahawak siya ng cellphone. But this is not good practice because you are actually distracting your child. So they don't pay attention to their inner signals of hunger and fullness. So hindi nila napapansin kung busog na din sila. Hindi rin nila napapansin kung gutom pa sila because their focus is actually on the gadget that they are holding. Actually, the mere presence of a television around the dinner table, it actually already distracts children. And it negatively influences their eating behavior. So some studies say that if you watch television during meal times, in the future, mas tinatanggihan ng mga bata yung mga iba-ibang klaseng pagkain, no? Because they're just distracted. Yun lang ang nagpapakain sa kanila. So you have to also serve age-appropriate food and serve small portions. So this is another thing that I want to stress, that you just give them small amounts initially, and then if they are still hungry, they will still ask for more. So you just allow them to, for example, if your child still wants to eat more, hayaan nyo na, just give more food, and then they will stop if they are already full, no? So they can be engaged in the eating process. So hindi, kapag madami ka kasing nilalagay sa plato nila, parang na-overwhelm yung mga bata because they think that I need to finish everything, no? So, or sometimes may ibang bata, they get bored. Pag nakikita pa lang nila na ang daming pagkain na nilagay sa harapan nila, then they don't want to eat anymore. So usually they stay more interested in eating when you only give frequent little portions, no? So it will also help them to learn to eat until they are full. Kasi nga pa konti-konti lang, busog na ako. So this is actually a very nice picture, no? So I included this because it says here that the plate on the left is distorted and then the reality is the one on the right. Because usually, as parents, what we think is that this is the amount of food that our child needs to eat. So kailangan kung ano yung nilagay mo sa plate niya, yun yung dapat niyang maubos. But in reality, konti lang naman yung kailangan niya. So hindi na natin dapat ina-advocate na you don't let your child leave the table unless malinis yung plato niya or wala nang natira sa plato niya. It's actually not a productive practice na kailangan maubos niya because you don't expect your child to eat as much as you do. That's the reason why you have to give appropriate servings and you just give more if your child is still hungry. So, systematically introduce new food. So what does it mean? So pag nagbibigay ka ng food sa bata, or especially if it's a new one, you just try to introduce one by one. So it can be every few days or every week. So you can actually observe the reaction of your child to the new food. No? So wag mo siyang bibigyan na, for example, 3 na pagkain sabay-sabay mong gustong i-introduce sa kanya. And then you will worry, bakit hindi niya kinain, no? Kasi ang sasabihin is that na-overwhelm sila sa dami ng pagkain na you are letting your child try. So another aspect in terms of feeding is that don't be a short order cook. So ano yung ibig sabihin nun? So sometimes, di ba, when the child refuses to eat, you try to look for different food. Ano na lang ba yung kakainin niya kasi para kumain siya? Yun na lang yung papakain ko. So because your goal is just for your child to eat. Gusto mo lang siyang kumain eh. So kahit ano na lang, basta gusto niya, yun na lang kasi ayaw niya yung prepare mo. So it's also a counterproductive practice because what happens is that ang nangyayari is you don't teach your child to eat healthy. Parang they, in a way, manipulate you into trying to make them eat kung ano lang yung gusto nila. So you should be the one. Remember, you are the one who should decide what your child will eat. So you should encourage self-feeding and you should tolerate age-appropriate mess. So what do I mean by that? May iba namang nanay ang sasabihin, doktora kasi ang dumi-dumi pag kumakain. Pagod na pagod ako na nag-prepare ng pagkain tapos ang dumi lang, natatapon lang yung pagkain. And I always say that, you know, you should be more patient. Meaning, because it's food eating is actually a learned behavior. So, hindi pa sila ganun kagaling. And through time, when they get older, no, they make less mess. And usually in toddlerhood, di ba, they explore. That's why you should be more tolerant of the mess that they are making when they are eating. So you also try to teach the child to sit at the table with you, with the mommy and the daddy, because usually they only learn to eat until they are full when they are already seated at the table. So for older children, you should try to follow a healthy eating plate because yung mga guidelines na yun, usually that's for toddlers, no? So how can you follow a healthy eating plate? So it's important to know when you say that it's a healthy eating plate, it's the right combination of nutrients and you should be able to give a variety of food from the 5 food groups. So ano yun? So the fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. And it also involves on how much you put on the plate. So gaano kadami yung servings, no? So yung Pinggang Pinoy, it's actually a visual tool that was developed by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute of the Department of Science and Technology. So this is what we are trying to teach the parents in our clinics. Pwede nyo to actually download sa website ng DOST so that you can actually print it and use it as a guide, no? So it will teach you, it will guide you on the right kind and the right amount of food in every meal. So they have one for children 3 to 12 years old, and they have one for teens also. So if you can see, yung plate siya, it's a visual representation because they will say, Doktora, hindi naman namin alam kung gaano talaga kadami dapat yung kakainin niya. So as you can see, your glow food, ano ba yun? Yung mga body regulating food, so your fruits and your vegetables, it comprises half of the plate. So ganun siya dapat kadami. And then your go food, so your energy giving food, which are usually your grains, yung mga bread, yung mga pasta, no? It should occupy 1/4 of the plate. And then your grow food, so your bodybuilding food like your meat and your other poultries, yung mga ulam in layman's, no? Dapat 1/4 siya ng plate. So that's the visual estimate, so that at least you know if you have all of those things on your child's plate, you are giving at least a diverse and healthy diet. So in this healthy plate or yung Pinggang Pinoy, makikita mo, they will also teach you on how to fill up your kids' plate. So kunyari, hindi mo talaga alam, an example is that for your go foods, the rice, they will tell you that you can give cooked rice or you can give small pandesal, and it will also tell you the amount and the number that you can give your child. So it's actually a very friendly guide for parents kasi meant talaga siya for you, for everyone, so that you can try to make your child eat healthy. So this is actually a visual representation ng real food na talaga. So as you can see there, so half of the plate is vegetables and fruit, and then 1/4 is your rice or it may be bread, and then another 1/4 of the plate is yung ulam, no? And you can also give snacks to your child, and the recommended is usually around 2 snacks per day. So again, this is the one for teens. So you can easily download it. So if, for example, you just want to start giving your child a healthy plate, so for older kids, ito yung kailangan nila na plate, no? So that's the ideal one. So now, when we try to counsel that, ang next question is, but Doktora, how can I get my child to eat the vegetables? Kasi hindi siya kumakain ng gulay, no? So children, they are born with a biological predisposition to prefer sweet and avoid bitter food. So yun yung mga green leafy vegetables, because it's the reason why they don't like vegetables, because mapait siya. So this predisposition, it evolved to attract children to energy-dense food. So mas gusto nila yung sweet, yung fatty, yung salty over vegetables kasi it's more palatable, mas masarap siya, no? But even if they have a predisposition for highly palatable food, the taste and food preferences are determined largely by exposure. So now, this is the answer to that question. Dr. Reyes mentioned earlier na pag hindi kumakain yung bata, you want to give vitamins. So is that the answer to make your child to eat vegetables and to eat healthier? So the most successful strategy to promote vegetable intake is mere or repeated exposure. So kailangan mo lang i-expose at i-offer ng paulit-ulit sa anak mo yung gulay until such time that they will accept it, nakakainin na niya. So, gaano kadami? Doktora, tinry ko one time pero ayaw niya talaga. But the vegetable consumption in even fruit or new food, it's increased with the number of exposure. So, ang sabi nila, for there to be able to a significant improvement para itry lang niya yung pagkain, it would require at least 8 to 15 times na in-offer mo ng in-offer sa anak mo yung gulay or whatever food that you're trying to make your child eat. So don't be too hard on yourself also, because it doesn't necessarily mean din naman kasi that after one time, after 3 tries, hindi pa rin tinatry yung anak mo. So that's why you just have to be patient and you just have to keep trying, because increased intake also does not mean that they like it. Ang tendency kasi, di ba, if you give the vegetable, hindi nila gusto, di ba, medyo parang yung mukha nila nag-iiba, and then pangit na. So you don't want to offer it anymore kasi hindi niya gusto. But your goal is for them to accept it. And once they accept it, you build towards liking it. Na in the end, gusto na rin niya yung pinapakain mo sa kanya, gusto na rin niya yung gulay, no? So the last one is about sugar sweetened beverage. So my tip is you have to think before you drink, or you think before offering your child sugar sweetened beverage. So this is a very good representation, no, about sugar sweetened beverages. So ang water, wala siyang sugar content. So the best drink for your child will always be water. And if you look at the other juices, especially Coke, ang daming bata, sasabihin lang, isa lang naman na baso. But if you look at the sugar content of Coke, it's actually very high, no? So your sugar sweetened beverages, these are the calories that are provided by these beverages have little to no nutritional value. So binibigyan mo sila ng calories, nakakadagdag. That's why hindi naman siya nutritious. It's only like a way for you to promote overweight and obesity in your child. Kasi para siyang empty calories. If sinama mo siya sa meal, the caloric intake, yung calories na kinakain ng anak mo, it increases exponentially. Pero asukal lang naman talaga yung binigay mo sa kanya. So the problem with that is usually it contributes to other diseases like your diabetes, and we see a lot of children who are fond of juices who have tooth decay, no? So the recommendation is that kids from 2 to 18 should only have around 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day, and for children less than 2 years old, dapat wala. No? So a child's eating behavior is fundamentally governed by what food are available and accessible to them. Meaning, kung ano yung binibigay niyong pagkain sa kanila. And the food made available to them will actually affect what they eat. So in summary, my tips for trying to make your child to eat healthy, of course, from the start, you have to exclusively breastfeed the child. And you have to have proper and timely introduction of your solid food while continuing to breastfeed. You have to practice responsive feeding. You have to, as parents, you have to model good eating behavior. You have to make eating fun and engaging for your child and get them involved. You have to set feeding guidelines. You need to follow a healthy eating plate, and you should say no to sugar sweetened beverage. So thank you for your attention.
Wow, that was really, really very good, Dr. Hilario. Sobrang kailangan nag-notes ang ating mga parents kasi sobrang useful sa mga mothers and sa mga parents na kasi syempre sa kids napaka-challenging ngayon. Kailangan talaga ng madaming patience. And you mentioned about yung mga food tracker. Sobrang, I find that really helpful kasi yung mga kids gusto nila ng challenge eh. Parang the more na na-challenge eh, parang the more silang kumakain. Parang di ba, minsan we have to give them charts para kukulayan nila. Parang nakaka-encourage din para sa kanila. So I'm sure madami tayong mga questions dyan from our parents. Kaya just type them down sa ating chat box. So for the first question, meron dito sa atin na nagtanong doktora regarding yung mga myths sa mga sinasabi ng mga matatanda sa atin. Like here from our my kid has a restless legs. He always stands up and walks around while eating. Is it true that this can cause appendicitis?
Well, it's not true, no? Hindi siya totoo.
Yes.
If you look at it medically and scientifically, hindi siya nakakakos. Yung isa pa nga dati, nakakita ako I was walking around the mall. takbo ng takbo yung bata, nagalit yung nanay. Sige, sige, takbo ka ng takbo, magkaka-appendicitis ka niyan. So, that's not true, no? It's a myth, actually, because that's not really the reason why. Kahit tumakbo pa siya, tumalon pa siya after eating, it will not cause appendicitis. Ano lang yun, siguro panakot lang ng mga matatanda nung panahon natin para hindi malikot.
Oo nga. Yes. So, Doc, you mentioned about, yun nga, di ba, yung sa Pinggan Pinoy, pero those are for 3 onwards. May mga guidelines ba? Kasi di ba you mentioned age-appropriate food and portions, yung consistency. Sa mga babies ba? Like, kasi di ba ang tendency ng mga, like, mga sasabihin, lalo for the first time mothers, sasabihin ng mga lola, bigyan mo, lugaw lang yan, bawal yung mga kung ano-ano. So, sa mga babies ba na starting ganyan, anong variety ng food ba dapat ang bibigay natin?
Usually kasi you start gradually, di ba, yung consistency. So to start, if you give your pureed food, so usually you start with fruits and vegetables, and then you give them milk. Because one principle in complementary feeding, meron silang dapat na diverse na diet, right? So meron tayong tinatawag na minimum diet diversity. So what does that mean, no? At least makakuha sila ng 3 food group per day. So for those children, sa start, if you give fruits, if you give vegetables, and then you're able to give milk, diverse na yun kagad. No? And then you start with the consistency. Usually kasi now, another thing that's stopping parents from giving other types of food, kasi parang nakalakihan natin before that you need to introduce like yung mga egg, yung mga fish at a later time, or yung chicken, because it might
hindi tuna
na allergy. Actually, it's more on yung allergy, no? But now, although I'm not an allergologist, but the recommendation now is you start early. Bigay mo na siya. You can actually give fish at 9 months. Usually yun, and then actually yung egg, you can actually start to give it as early as around 8 months. Pwede mo na siyang ibigay, no? For as long as the consistency is right.
It's appropriate, yes.
Yes, kasi hindi pa naman sila magaling ngumuya. Yung tongue movement nila, that's the reason why you need to change the consistency through time. It's more on because of the skills of the child in terms of feeding.
So ganun din, Doc, in terms of meat, yun sa beef, sa pork, ganun.
You may start giving in small amounts. And in children kasi, like in toddlers, it's very difficult for me to say, ito yung dapat nakakainin niya. Because as I said, it depends on their ability to eat. It depends on their hunger and then their satiety. That's why you need to give small portions, pakonti-konti. Pag gutom pa siya, they will ask for more eh. Di ba may mga ibang bata sasabihin ng mommy, doktora, hingi siya ng hingi, and then that's fine. Because it just means that they still have an appetite, no? Gusto pa nilang kumain, and you just let them eat.
Yes, Doc. Actually, meron pa dito na nag-comment, Doc. Di ba, remember dun sa appendicitis, miski pagkain ng mga buto na maliliit, like kamatis, magkaka-appendicitis ka. Or, Doc, paano naman yung mga, halimbawa, pagkakain, bawal kang humiga, matulog, ganyan. How many hours does a child need to let the food be fully digested before you put them to nap? Yung mga ganyan.
More on, if we're talking about that, we talk about the emptying, kung kailan gumagalaw yung pagkain sa tiyan, no? So basically, around 3 to 4 hours, usually na-empty na yung tiyan natin. Depende naman. If the child is too full, usually, syempre, kasi it's natural for us to have reflux episodes. Yun naman yung fear mo, like if you lie down after eating, baka parang sabi nila bumabalik yung pagkain kasi punong-puno. But sometimes I say that 2 hours. So kunyari yung mga bata, I advise them also to prevent like reflux, especially for patients with reflux. Dapat 2 hours before bedtime, di na sila kumain, no? To prevent that. So, pero yung mga bata kasi they snack. Yung iba nga, di ba, nagbobote habang
patulog.
So you just position them to decrease
Yes,
the risk of aspiration.
Meron tayong question dito from Facebook Live, Doc. Does physical activity affect digestion of the kids?
Not really, no. Not really, but they said kasi that if you move after if you move after meals, parang mas na-stimulate niya yung gastrocolic reflex. What does that mean? Yung paggalaw ng bituka mo after eating. But wala siyang proven na recommendation na dapat gumalaw ka. But for others, it helps. Sabi nila parang it facilitates nga yung parang pagbaba ng pagkain. But it's not a hard and fast rule, no, na kailangan gumalaw sila pagkatapos or hindi gumalaw.
Yes, Doc. Sa mga babies naman, Doc. So kasi 'di ba there are mga baby-led weaning na becoming popular to parents. What can you comment about that, Doc?
Okay. Baby-led weaning kasi is like, so remember, sila yung masusunod. So you just give the food and then yung bata lang yung kumakain. And then usually they start with finger food. Yan yung thing kasi with baby-led weaning. In the beginning kasi it seems as if masaya because the child is eating. But we don't advocate baby-led weaning because in the long run, no, they don't really get enough nutrients. Kasi hindi pa naman nila talaga kaya to eat all those finger food at usually 6 months. And since they don't have the ability yet, wala pa naman silang pincer grasp at 6 months, 7 months. So hindi talaga nila nabe-bring to their mouth. Madumi lang yan, no? So sometimes hindi we don't advise it. And usually in baby-led weaning, they give a lot of vegetables. And we also say that there should be caution kasi biglang sumusobra naman sa fiber kasi puro gulay lang yung binibigay. Nako-constipate din yung bata.
Alright.
It's one problem that they see in baby-led weaning.
Okay. Sa mga, balik tayo ulit sa mga pag-i-introduce ng mga food or ano sa mga babies, in preparing food daw, can salt be added or tapos when is the right time to introduce juice and how much needed in a day?
Okay. As much as possible, syempre no added salt, no added sugar. No? Kasi remember, they already have a predisposition for salty food. So kung yun pa, at saka sweet na food. So kung yun yung laging ibibigay mo sa kanila na pagkain, salty and sweet food, then the more that they are not prone to trying new taste. So mas lalong hindi sila kumakain ng gulay kasi mas sanay sila na matamis at maaalat lang yung kinakain nila. That's why you need to have a diverse diet and you need to expose and expose. Now in terms of juice, of course, I stress that we want the child to drink just water. It's the best drink for everyone. But if you're going to give juice, then the best would be fresh juice. Because if you're gonna give yung mga juice na powdered juice, that's actually added sugar. So kaya
calamansi juice, Doc.
Pero kasi sobrang asim niya, right? So the tendency is for you to put sugar. So ayaw nga natin ng added sugar eh. So usually you can give the child, depending on the age of the child, no? So mas maganda if you start at around 1 year old na dun mo na lang sila bigyan ng juice and then the recommended amount is usually just 4 ounce. 4 lang. 4 ounce lang yung ibibigay mo. That's already the whole day. So 4 ounce is like
for the whole day.
120. So half a glass lang yung pwede mong ibigay. So of course hindi yun yung juice na 8 o'clock, mga minute meal.
Sugar.
Hindi not that kind of juice. And then
how about, Doc, yung mga yogurt drink?
Sugar sweetened pa rin kasi yan eh. Sa totoo lang, yes, it's milk and it's fermented. You think that it's healthy kasi yogurt, di ba?
Tsaka may mga probiotics.
Yes, it would still fall under
sugar.
Under sugar sweetened beverage. Because if you're just after the probiotics, nasa pagkain naman yan. So if you give your child vegetables, naandun na yung probiotic. So hindi mo na siya kailangan bigyan ng mga yogurt or juice na may probiotic. So it's really about establishing a diverse diet and a healthy and complete diet. That's why hindi mo kailangan ng vitamins talaga. Because if you are actually giving the
balance.
right, yes, a balanced diet, lahat makukuha niya. You get everything. If you give your protein, if you give your vegetables, you give your fruits, and then your grains, kumpleto na yon. So they don't actually even if you look at the guidelines, 'di ba? May sasabihin kailangan bang magbigay. Ang sasabihin lang talaga sa is talagang kung kailangan niya ng vitamins.
Deficiency.
It's not
nga do kasi common yan, every visit ng parents. Do, anong vitamins, ganyan. Oh, ang hirap pa kayo, do, kailangan ng vitamins, ganyan. So, talagang akala nila, nagre-rely lang tayo talaga sa vitamins.
Ang lagi
sa
kong
mga
question,
supplements.
siguro hindi mawawala yung question. Doktora, pwede mo bang bigyan ng vitamins yung anak ko para naman tumaba? And I always say na hindi naman nakakataba ang vitamins eh.
Tsaka yung kumain, ganyan.
Oo. But really, all those, well, yung mga appetite stimulants, no, personally, I don't really give it. Pero pag gusto talaga, I say, of course, sige, you may try for just 2 months. And if nothing happens after 2 months, then tigil mo na. Because yun yung sinasabi ko, wala naman magic. It doesn't mean pag binigyan mo siya ng mga ganon, bukas kakain na siya ng gulay. Hindi naman ganon eh. So parang, that's one notion that na kailangan.
Tsaka siguro, Doc, more on, yung techniques talaga, yung mga minention mo, yung techniques ng parents, yung meal preparation, yung exposure, dun, you have to check that din sa yung background ng patient. Hindi lang basta bigyan mo appetite stimulant yan, bukas kakain. Hindi naman ganon. It's not like that.
One thing.
Like, Doc, di ba yung sa mga babies din, you've mentioned, di ba, yung preparation ng food, ganyan, na walang mga salt. So yung kasi mga common at easy to get yung mga cereal puffs, mga naka-jar na food, baby food, tsaka naka-tetra pack. So what can you comment on those?
Well, kasi yan, they are very convenient. Diba? So it's very convenient and you have to remember that they make those foods in such a way that it's very palatable for children. So matamis, 'di ba? Yan yung mga matamis, may flavor. Well, if you want to give it, for me, I tell my patients, sige, okay lang, but you have to try to make your child's food. Kasi 'di ba syempre may preservatives yung mga, unlike if you make your own child's food, you know what you're giving your child. You know kung gaano kadami yung binibigay mo sa kanya, hindi yung mga preservatives, and then you are able to teach your child to try different kinds of food. Yung mga cereal puffs, if you look at the nutritional, parang hangin lang siya. Parang kaya nga, kasi tinignan ko na rin. Kasi parang cute siya, di ba? Nasa magandang lalagyan siya and it has flavors. But then, if you want to give finger foods, kasi yun yung mga finger food talaga, you just try to give vegetable sticks na lang or yung mga bread instead of giving yung mga artificial na pagkain, no? You want
kailangan talagang pag-effortan.
Wala
Kailangan may effort kasi ang hirap like in food preparation,
which I understand.
Talaga.
Oh, kasi
effort.
Mahirap naman talaga, especially if the parents are working. So yung mga mommy, don't feel too bad na feeling nyo hindi nyo nabibigay sa anak ninyo. Naiintindihan naman, but siguro you can just start by just trying. Or turuan nyo yung ang sinasabi ko, so next time you come and visit me, dalhin nyo yung nag-aalaga. So siya yung tuturuan ko. Kasi kung hindi kaya ng parents because they're working, lalo yan lola, di ba napaka-indulgent lola. Kasi naaawa, yun ang gusto ng bata. So, yun sabi ko, sige, sama mo si Lola next time para si Lola yung kakausapin ko because they need to really hear about the importance of healthy eating for children. No?
True.
Turuan yung mga nagbabantay, turuan
Prepare
yung
din ng food
kasama.
sa kanila. Doc, sa milk naman, Doc. So when should we give milk? Up to when should we give milk to kids? Like for reasons of bone banking. So can you comment on the use of vitamin D and zinc to increase their immunity? And another milk related, yung mga obese naman sa other side of the spectrum. Di ba, syempre, like, naging obese sila because they eat yung mga sweet and ganyan. But still, they need the nutrients of the milk. Paano yon? Magmi-milk pa ba sila? Heavyweight na sila, gano'n.
Okay, so that's a good question, Doctora. But what I always tell my patients, pagdating ng 1-year-old, dapat 2 baso na lang ng gatas. So usually, when they reach 1, kasi yan, lagi yan when I see patients in the clinic, doktora, 5 bote pa, 6 na bote pa, 7 bote pa ng milk, no? So, that's why at 12 months, you need to teach the child to eat table food. Kasi yun na yung dapat na kinakain niya. And your milk should only be a supplement. So pagdating talaga ng 1-year-old, the recommendation is you give 2 glasses of milk per day. And then as they grow older, sometimes yung iba pagdating ng mga 3 to 5, you can actually increase it to 3 glasses per day for that reason, no? So you want more calcium, but you can actually give that in, may iba naman din sources yan. So that's how you give the milk. So dapat talaga maturuan mo silang kumain. So in terms of zinc and vitamin D supplementation, well, I know kasi uso ngayon yan because of COVID, di ba? Yes. That's the reason why, but the use of vitamin D, usually the recommendation is at birth. So you give vitamin D usually at birth. Hindi pa kasi siya masyadong ina-advocate sa Pilipinas. But in the US and in Canada, it's already part of their guidelines that at birth, you supplement the child with vitamin D. Kasi ang vitamin D status of the child is very dependent on the vitamin D status of the mother. So it doesn't mean na since we are a tropical country, maaraw sa atin, sufficient na yung vitamin D. Actually, hindi. Even in other countries wherein tropical countries sila, they see that there's a lot of vitamin D deficiency. So the recommendation is you start your vitamin D supplementation. Zinc naman, usually yan,
you have... Excuse me, yun sa vitamin D, for how long yan, Doc?
Usually,
continuous na.
Tuloy-tuloy, pwede mo siyang ibigay. Kasi, di ba, when you start your complementary feeding, again, you are now able to give to give the other nutrients to the child. Actually, sa ibang bansa, the higher the dose of the vitamin D supplementation, the better. Sa atin kasi pag titignan mo, in our recommendation for the Philippine Dairy dietary requirement, parang nasa 200 IU lang yung gusto nating ibigay na vitamin D. But in other countries, it can be as high as 400 to 800 IU per day ng vitamin D. And also yung zinc, you should just be guided by the RDI, no? Yung recommended na dietary intake per day. Yun yung parang pinaka natin. So usually naman kasi the vitamins, they give it. Kasi you should also be careful in supplementing children with different kinds of vitamins. Kasi like I said, just give a healthy diet and they'll be able to get all the nutrients they need if you give a healthy diet talaga. So let's not make it a habit, mga mommies, na pag may kulang, you just supplement with vitamins. So it's more on, that's why kaming mga pediatricians, we really want to teach you on how to make your child eat healthy so that hindi sila magkaka-feeding problems and you don't need all of those vitamins, no?
So how about naman dun sa obese?
Okay, sa obese, there's something I want to share with you, no? So sabi mo ililimit ba? So of course, kaya sila nagiging obese because yes, for some, sobrang kinakain nila, but more on it's the quality of food that they take in. Pag yung bata, the first step, the first management ng pagiging obese, sa mga bata who are obese is lifestyle modification. Hindi gamot, hindi katulad ng sa mga older age group gamot. And you will see that if you just alter or you just fix the quality of their food intake, pumapayat sila. Hindi mo binabago yung amount, but you just alter the quality. Improve the quality, yun din. And then you also have to evaluate. There's this psychiatrist na expert siya sa feeding. So for parents, you try to observe your child because they said that for obese patients or for children who eat too much, tayo ring mga matatanda, they said that you have a hunger of the mouth, you have a hunger of the heart, and you have a hunger of the stomach. So minsan yung hunger of the mouth, there's just a certain taste na gusto mong kainin. So may mga bata kasi gusto lang nila lagi may matamis at may salty. So even if they're not hungry, kakain sila ng kakain because they have the hunger of the mouth. Gusto lang nila yung lasa. The hunger of the heart is minsan may mga bata when they are emotionally stressed, kapag napapagalitan sila ng parents, if napapagalitan sila sa school or they are stressed, they eat a lot. So it can be a risk factor for them eating too much. And yung isa, yung totoong gutom, yung hunger of the stomach because they are really hungry. But like I said, you have to set your feeding guidelines because that's the foundation for everything. If at pagbata sila, you set your guidelines, hindi sila masyadong nagkakaroon ng problems in terms of feeding, no?
Feeding. Oh, thank you so much, Doc.
Milk. Pwede pa din naman.
So sa milk, pwede pa rin.
It's still part of a diverse diet eh. Pero kailangan mo lang talagang, you have to look at the quality of food.
Ng iba pang food nila. Yes. Naku, sobrang helpful, sobrang dapat talaga nag-notes tayo dito dahil mga advice din natin sa mga magulang ng ating mga patients. So Doc, any message, final message dito sa ating topic about nutrition? Anything you want to say to our parents?
So to the parents, yes, it's hard. Mahirap talaga siya. But then, you just have to think about the health of your child, and you just have to be patient, and you just have to really try, diba? Because the key to everything for you to be successful is really patience. So yun lang yung masasabi ko. I hope that with everything that I said tonight, at least yun yung isa yung matatandaan, that you will just keep on trying and you have to be more patient in trying to teach your child to eat healthy.
Dr. Irish, you want to add something about nutrition?
Actually, malaking challenge siya, especially for a working parent.
Yes.
Tapos stay at home pa sila, Tapos homeschooling pa sila, Parang mabuang na itong mga nanay na to na nagturo na ako, nagluto pa ako, nagpaligo. But actually, you are doing, ako nga personally, malalaki na mga anak ko, Itong pandemic na to, blessing sa akin. I was able to go back to the kitchen, I was able to go back to my grocery, and then balance everything. So that is also, nagki-cleaning pa ako. So that is actually the challenge to our parents. If there's a will, there's a way. Okay? And then, tama yun, yung role modeling. Kasi yung parents ngayon nagne-Netflix, kain ng kain. Yeah. And then, ito pa, ang malaking kalaban natin ng mga social media. Nagkaka-idea yung mga bata on, sabi ko nga kapon, yung BTS meal na yan, naku po, maraming bata. And then, ang isa pa ang kalaban natin, yung mga promo ng mga Jollibee and McDonald's na may free toys.
Happy Meal.
Oo. Ang gusto nila, kukolektahin nila yung buong set, Kahit
Yes,
ayaw mo nang maamoy yung spaghetti ng brand na yun. Yung chicken yun.
Burger nila.
Oo nga eh. I don't know how can we make hamburgers and chicken something healthy. It's an imagination using the pinggang Pinoy, right?
Yes.
So kumuha ka portion ng Jollibee doon, portion ng spaghetti, lagyan mo ng gulay at saka fruits. And then water. Water talaga. Kasi like yan yung milk tea na, di ba? Nakalagay doon.
Yeah.
Ano ba yun? Healthy and something. My God, Mami, try mo yung cha, lagyan mo ng asukal, hindi mo ma-achieve yung tamis nung
Sobrang
Oo,
tamis, Doc.
tapos eto pa, no, yung pandemic na to, yung milk tea, yung lahat. Kaya yung mga bata bumabalik sa clinic, ang tataba kasi nag-milk tea sila, akala nila milk and tea. But actually, these are two horns, no, against a proper diet. Dapat talaga promote natin yung water. Yeah. So, I think it's timely kasi nasa bahay na sila. Gusto ko din yung tip mo na let them help you do the food, no?
Yes, Doc.
Makikita nila yung colors. Parang sa grocery, pang pang abroad. Yung grocery natin kasi lahat ng gondola nandun yung presentation eh. Talagang yung marketing nila na eye level ng bata eh, no? Ito kasi binabayaran nila yon. So it really entices the colors, the font, no? So at saka kung saan cubicle, kikita ng bata talaga eh. They recognize it by the colors na, hindi lang by the ganyan. Hindi nila babalik din yung kung ano makita. Makakita lang yan ng cute vegetable, sasabihin ng nanay, ayun no, vegetable. But in fact, even nga yung dried fruits, no? Ang taas ng sugar. So I think this webinar should open up our eyes even as pediatricians on let's take time on guiding our parents, no, on the proper nutrition. Kasi minsan nga nakaka-guilty, no, gagraduate sa ating edad. Pagpasa mo, no, transition clinic, may diabetes na kasi we did not take time giving nutrition. Tapos may hypertension na kasi kain na ng salty food, no? Tapos
Fast foods.
kasi we never give time na, hoy, move kayo. Pati attention nila kasi lagi silang online, naka-iPad. Nagka-diphtheria, pertussis, kasi inalimutan natin ibigay yung booster, no, ng pertussis and ganyan, MMR. So these are actually the things, these are actually the goal of our webinar, you know. So beyond the well baby checkup, it's up to 2 years old. Balik po kayo, no, 3, 4, 5, ganyan. Kasi the pediatricians are there until 18, even up to 21, ano. Meron pa nga siguro like me, I have forever 21 kids, no? They don't want to leave the clinic. So if a pediatrician is actually babalik sa iyo, no? And this is what is making us different from other doctors, no? Malaki ang chunk ng preventive medicine in our part. Okay, vaccination, accident prevention, nutrition, and then no, next week. So ito yung pagkain. Ano yung iinumin? Kaya bato-bato tips, no? So related tong dalawang to. And this is actually very timely with the unfortunate demise of our president, no? So, kidney disease does not start as an adult. Somehow you can always break it back on the insults of salt, sugar to the kidney, and even all the food. Yeah. So I hope, no, all of these lifestyle that we are giving to our parents, no, kahit wala kayo sa amin, hindi namin madi-discuss ko in the clinic. We're just given 15 to 20 minutes, no. These are actually supplements of our anticipatory guidance, and I hope we are helpful. Thank you, Laika. That was a new.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor, also for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Doc. So
7:39, no, kahit gusto pa natin. Okay.
Yeah. So, Dr. Thank you very much. With Qualimed Hospital Santa Rosa, we would like to present this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Angelica May A. Hilario for her expertise and valuable role as speaker during the webinar entitled It's Time to Eat Right, Nutrition Tips for Your Kids, given this 28th day of June 2021 via Zoom virtual event. Signed, Attorney Nirmala Barbara Vanguardia and Dr. Lilibet M. Maravilla. Thank you, Doctora.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's ask our CEO, Attorney Nimu.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Reese. First of all, I'd like to thank our resource speaker for tonight, Dr. Hilario. Thank you so much for that very insightful and very practical guides that you have shared, Doctor. Me, I'm also a parent to a 7-year-old, and I find it very helpful. And in fact, parang nagsisi ako kasi madami doon hindi ko nagawa. I'm part of those guilty working moms, but hopefully there's still enough time for me to catch up on that. And also, I'd like to congratulate our pediatrics department under the leadership of Dr. Reese. Thank you very much, Dr. Reese, and our doctors in QualiMed for your continuous commitment in coming up with this very educational series or webinars. It amazes me witnessing and listening to all of you reacting, not just on a personal note from your experiences with your children, but also trying to get as much learning so that you can share it to your patients. So parang kitang-kita ko yung commitment ng ating entire pediatrics department. So I'm very, I think QualiMed and the entire community that we are serving are very fortunate that we have these doctors who are really committed in improving or ensuring that we will have healthy Filipino children in the future. So thank you very much. And as we end this night, I hope all of us, after all the learnings, will have a restful night. And then moving forward, sana we'll really wake up to one day we'll have children who have the motivation to, or the willpower to drink water instead of the colored drinks. So thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you po, Attorney.
Thank you.
It's 7:30. I want to invite to you next July 20. It's not actually the last Tuesday because our last week is actually our annual convention, and the pediatricians will be obliged to be there. So we're moving it a week earlier. We have an equally interesting webinar by no other than our super pediatric nephrologist, Dr. Reden Alfonso Silva. Please don't miss this. Please don't miss this. It's Batot Kids. Okay. Now, I also want to plug that QualiMed also has a fever clinic. So just in case, not just in case, your kid is sick, fever, cough, and colds, we have a special area in QualiMed that's actually beside the 7-Eleven. You text the number of the pedia secretary so that you can alert your pediatrician, and then so that we can safely and you can safely bring your kid to be seen in our fever clinic. So thank you. These are actually all our other announcements and services from the QualiMed Hospital. Ingat pa rin po. And good evening.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you po. Good evening.
Thank you.